figured out. I thought I did, and then I got to a point I was like, what? But anyway, if you guys want to read the first, how about 2 verses? Daniel 8, I'm sorry, did I say Daniel 1?
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
you
like
took Daniel 1 earlier. I was like,
we're
what?
going back?
Sorry.
Man, I just had it. I don't know what happened to it. Ran
I'll
away.
read it.
Okay.
8, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that had already appeared to me. In my vision, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa in the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside the Ulai Canal.
This is the 3rd year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, or Belshazzar's reign, my bad. 2 years beyond, I think, the last chapter. So this is the 2nd recorded dream that he
This
had.
is after that crazy dream that freaked him out.
Yeah, the dream, yeah, the last week. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now, as far as the time frame, because I've been showing you the timeline, but this is probably about 550 or 551 BC. This is also 11 to 12 years before Babylon is invaded by who?
The Medes and Persians.
Right. Now, in the 2nd verse, it says Daniel sees in a vision. He's in Shushan, the palace, which is in the province of Elam. Do we have any idea where that is? Anybody know?
No,
No, but I looked up Citadel and it was a capital.
it's a capital?
I thought it was a tower
Oh.
did too.
or a stronghold.
So in the vision, and this is how I took it. I think there's a question of what does this mean? I took it like he's in the midst of a vision and he is in a place called Shushan, which is in the province of Elam, which is modern day Iraq. So what I wanted to, send I want to share a screen with you because there's so much history in this particular chapter that I figured in order to get you guys to kind of get on board with where on earth is he and where was he, last chapter, I'm going to just type in here, this is Google Earth. And if you guys can see that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You can see this is the Middle East. We see Iraq, we see Iran. Over here to the left is Israel. Syria is up here. This is modern day, but we can easily just type in the locations and we can find like historic Babylon here. They found the ruins and so forth. So this, as you can see, this little red thingy, the pinpoint thingy, is in modern day Iraq. But in his vision, he is in Elam, which is today is referred to as Iran, and he's in a place called Shushan, or in today's world, it is a place called Shush, like shush, stop making noise. So here it is on the map. Now, over here, kind of off at an angle with the Q in Iraq was where Babylon was. So Shushan is in what in essence is Iran, but it's also where the Medes and Persians are from. So maybe it helps to identify. Now I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit. And it's just kind of interesting because you can go way in. You could see over here, it says the tomb of Daniel.
Uh-huh.
Wow,
Oh,
look
wow.
at all that land around it.
This is Shush or Shushan, or in other Bibles, it's referred to as Susa.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's what ours is.
And so this is modern day. It's also the other thing that's going to be referenced here. See this over here?
Yeah.
It's a river. It's called Ulia or something like that, or Ubal in some other Bibles. But today it's called like Karka or something like that, as you can see over here. So if we zoomed in, they even have this picture, which they think here, and it's not a picture, it's just a Google Earth, which was once the temple where Daniel's referring to having been, or the Citadel, I think you had said it was, which might be this, the ruins right here, which I think they must be in the process of doing an archaeological thing on it right now. But there is this thing over here that's called the Tomb of Daniel, which is a really interesting story in that, but I don't think they really think he's physically buried there, because of long and short of it, he was supposedly buried there, but for some reason his bones were holy, so they fought for him between, I guess, Babylon and the Medes and the Persians, and they fought for him. And at one point, this river right over here, Karkesh, was the dividing line between one nation and another nation. And so they ended up putting his body in the river so both sides could access the remains or visit it. And so I think there's some confusion as to whether they left him in the river, but you can imagine if they put your coffin or whatever in a river, what would happen to it.
I mean, if you put it on the river, it would float away.
I think they tied it to something, so he didn't float, but he was kind of shared. The remains of him was kind of shared by people. Anyway, getting back to what the two verses, one of the things about this city, and I'll unshare this in just a second, is it was a place where the king of Persia or kings of Persia had their residence, like their summer residence there. Daniel's somewhere in this area on the bank of this river in the midst of his vision, which again, if I zoom out, we can see it's modern day Iran, the western side of Iran, and this would be Iraq, and Babylon would be right about here in this area.
Why
So,
was he all the way over there if Babylon was over there?
well, I think the thought is, number one, he's a diplomat, but number two, it's a vision that he was there.
Oh, okay.
Now, my guess would be he's been put in kind of in charge. Well, actually, now that I think about it, I don't know if in Belshazzar's reign, by the time the handwriting showed up on the wall, whether he was still in his position. So, but he had been a diplomat or a political guy for a long time. So my guess he would have traveled and be somewhat familiar with this. I could be wrong, but.
Yeah, that's far.
So he's on the banks of the river. I do want to exit out of that real quick. I always forget. I'll stop share. Okay.
There you go.
And I wanted to go back a picture or two. And I just want to show you the river. There's nothing super special about it, but here's what the river looks like today. Your standard kind of river. You can see that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another picture of it. Kind of a rudimentary, almost like something in the midst of like a desert or something. That provides sustenance to the areas along the banks or whatever, something along those lines. But I will end this share too and get back to what we were saying. So rivers, now this is interesting, and looking at this, the river was seen as very wholesome. The water was considered sweet. That's one of the reasons why the kings of Persia used to have summer residence here. Now, do you remember which of the Medes and the Persians, which ones were considered stronger of the two? Anybody remember?
Wasn't it the Medes?
I think they maybe were originally, but I think by the time they took over Babylon, the Persians were. I think that's the way that it, and because it does mention that in one of the dreams, I can't remember if it was last week or one of the other weeks, where the vision that he saw of some type of animal, was it a leopard or whatever?
Oh, and one side was up.
Yeah, the bear, that's what it was.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, let's get back to the text here. So somebody read the next two verses, 3 and 4.
All right. I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns, standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as it charged toward the west and the north and the south. No animal could stand against it, and none could rescue from its power. It did as it pleased and became great.
Okay, so the ram with two horns standing in front of the river that Daniel standing near or besides or on the banks of. Its horns were high. One was higher and the higher one came up last. So we made mention of that a second ago. Who was it again? You guys remember?
The Medes and Persians, and the Persians became stronger.
Yeah. So I think in terms of history, the Medes would be like an ancient culture that rose up over the Persians in that area, and then eventually, as we'll go over today, they kind of the Persians kind of gained strength and power. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So
And
the
we're-
ram. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you might have been heading here, but then, and then when it says west and north and south, or is that where like they were like kind of located?
I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward. That's a really good question. I was just about to touch upon that.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Because then when I was reading the east, I was like, wait, isn't the east like what the sun rises on the east? Well, I'm getting ahead. I was thinking.
Who does the ram represent here, we think? Any ideas?
I don't know. I know the horns are like power, right?
Was it Babylon?
Couldn't it be, it will,
Would it be
go ahead.
Medes and Persians?
It would have to be because one of the horns came
Yeah.
up last, so yeah, it would be symbolic of the Medes and Persians.
The
Okay.
horn.
Well, the horn would represent one of each. One would be the Medes, the first one, and then the one that came up last and was stronger were the Persians. A matter of fact, if we look to somebody who just want to read Daniel 8:20, we'll skip ahead some verses.
820. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia.
Okay.
That- yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so that tells you what that is.
Yeah, it's kind of like some of this is easy to follow, and then you hit it like a kind of a brick wall. But in Daniel 2, we saw the statue with the gold, the silver. This would be the silver. They'd be the silver. They're also the bear in last chapter. In this chapter, they're a ram. Why it's that way, I really couldn't tell you. It would be a lot easier to understand if every one of these dreams was kind of the same image, not,
Yeah.
It is, it's odd, right?
yeah,
And
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
they must all represent a different aspect of the
Yeah.
same picture.
yeah.
and I feel like wasn't back then, like, didn't we say, or somebody had said like animals were like a significant, like there was significance in different animals. So it must have been like in the culture.
Right.
Yeah, I'm
Hi,
sure. it
Deb.
was. Hey, Deb.
Yeah, that could be.
Deb, we're on verse 3 and 4 of Daniel 8.
Oh, we're continuing with Daniel.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it'd be easy. Haha. What a fool.
Yeah.
So we get to this point, and Daniel's dream was 550 or 551 BC-ish. Now we're going to morph. We're going to talk about what you just asked, Meg, ultimately in the long run. We're going to talk about the rise of Cyrus. Because if you remember back in, I can't remember if it was Daniel 4 or 5, or it was 5, I think, where the Medes and the Persians went through the river or whatever, and then they went into Babylon.
Yeah.
And they made mention of Daniel, but Cyrus was like, I want to say his nephew or something like that. But Cyrus was a Mede and Persian. And we're talking about the ram here, that's representative of Medes, the Medes and the Persians. So I'm going to flash a picture up, which in essence is going to be a picture of this area in the Medes and Persian area. So I'm going to share this, but what you're going to see in just a second, there it is basically the way the kingdom seemed to be. You guys can see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can see Babylon here. Now, of course, this is the same image we saw on Google Earth a few minutes ago. We see Jerusalem here, which Babylon had control of this kind of upside down V or whatever. And right over here, we have Media. And if you notice, Persis here,
Uh-huh.
we also see the city of Susa over here, which is Shushan. And we see how big the Medo and Persian Empire was. And this is also before, like, you know, the Medes and the Persians took over Babylon here. And you can see this country up top here called Lydia.
Yeah.
Okay, these will play a little bit of a role in what we're going to talk about in this chapter of Daniel, in particular Babylon, Media, and Lydia. And eventually it'll make mention of down here on the bottom left. This would be Egypt. And of
Okay.
course, over here is Greece, the Mediterranean, blah, blah, blah. But I'm gonna talk about.
Wait, can I
Cyrus.
ask something?
Yeah,
Media is really big. Why was Babylon so in control of the world when Media was really a large area?
well, I think what we find out is there was peace amongst these. And it's not mentioned when Daniel's writing about Babylon, because he's from Babylon, but they weren't constantly at war. But that's a good question. But like, for instance, that was the first thing as we talk about Cyrus, there was a general agreement between those three nations, Media, Babylon, and Lydia. Within Media, the Persians were, as we mentioned earlier, the vassal state or subservient to the Medes. Okay, or we had said a few minutes ago about in the picture that you're looking at, the Medes, that being at the Persians at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And the Medes would be the name of the kingdom is after the Medes, not the Persians. Now, Cyrus's grandfather was king of the Medes. He's got a long drawn out name. I'm not going to try and say it, but his grandpop was a Mede king, or the Mede king. Cyrus, on the other hand, grandson, was a king in the Persian area, as you see on the map, of Media.
Wow.
Cyrus rebelled against his grandfather, and he captures him, and he ends up taking over the kingdom. And instead of it being primarily Medes, it's a Medo-Persia, because he didn't, I think there was some question of whether he killed his grandfather or whether he kind of ruled alongside him or made him like one of his cabinet members or something like that. But Cyrus, in essence, takes over. Now, Cyrus captures his king in 549 or 550. So this is about a year after the dream that Daniel has. Cyrus rebels within his own nation and becomes the king over his grandfather. So the question is, Daniel, who's a diplomat in some form, a politician, probably is aware of what's going on in the neighborly kingdoms. He probably has some understanding of it. Considering they were at peace with one another, and suddenly he's hearing some type of war going on, not far from where he is, although it's a few hundred miles away. But he would eventually recognize this. So Cyrus takes over, Daniel's in Babylon. Cyrus isn't satisfied taking over his own country. He conquers Lydia. Within 3 to 4 years, he suddenly controls that whole upper area. Okay. So you would think the handwriting's on the wall in some regard, as far as if you're one of the diplomats in Babylon, you're thinking, crap, everywhere north and east of us is the enemy, or could be the enemy. And look, he's taken over Lydia. Holy cow, we used to be, we used to all live in peace. What on earth is going on? So in September of 539, it's probably about 8 years after Lydia is captured by Cyrus, Cyrus begins the process of attacking Babylon. And he does right above, go back to the picture, he does right above where Babylon is. You can see it, Babylon here. It's a little ways up the river. Not far from the Euphrates or across, like on the eastern side of the Euphrates. He begins to fight a battle that may have stretched on for a few years, or it may not. Actually, I'm sorry, I was wrong there. See this opus right here? Do you see
Mhm.
that?
Yeah.
There's a battle there, and it's not the Euphrates, it's the Tigris. So Opus is over here. There's a battle between both kingdoms there for Babylon. This is 539. Now we know what happens in 539. Eventually he takes over that city and goes over to Babylon here, and he begins the process of drying up or diverting the Euphrates River and marches into Babylon and takes over. Okay, we know that happens eventually, but right at
And
the
that was
moment,
that, I'm sorry, Derek. So it was that when he walked, or maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. Was that when he walked in to the party and killed?
yeah, because what would have happened if that little city Opus that I showed, that would have been their first incursion into Babylon. So that was 539, and here we have later within that same year, it might have been within a month or two of him going to Opus, he goes and basically walks into Babylon. It suggests that the Babylonians had plenty of time in preparing and being ready, but they were at the end of their kind of age, kind of so to speak, and weren't really, although they put up some battle in Opus, by the time they got to Babylon, they weren't, really prepared at all. So Meg, you had asked me about the words that were used in Daniel 4, where it says the ram charged westward. So this is Susa, westward would be, they went into Babylon, they went northward in the direction of Lydia. And they may have captured these other areas like Cappadocia and Cilicia, maybe even Armenia. I'm not really sure. They might have already captured those, and the other place they did, they went southward. Well, southward, they captured some of these nations down in this area, Arabia. They eventually went into Egypt too, in some form or fashion.
Oh.
So before Cyrus, and this is about 11 years, Daniel's dream, he's having a dream. And well, let me just say it again. The mention of this ram who charges north, west, and south is fulfilled in Medo-Persia. So Daniel's seeing that the nation that's ultimately going to take over his nation is a ram. And my guess is he knows, because he's probably familiar with, the location of the city. And he's also probably familiar with the river in that area because he's a diplomat, because and plus he mentions it too. So he saw precisely where this seemed to be by like 550 or 551. But there had to be political rustlings that he's hearing of in some form or fashion, you would think. It doesn't say that, but there might have been. Somebody want to read 5 and 6? Daniel 5 and 8, 5 and 6.
As I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without ground. It came toward the two-horned ram, and I had seen standing beside the canal, and charged it in great rage.
So a he-goat from the west comes over the whole earth without touching the ground. It makes mention, and had notable horn between his eyes. Any idea who this is?
Greece.
Yes. Daniel, somebody read the verse 21 in that chapter.
The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king.
Okay, so this is Greece, and the horn, any idea who the horn was?
It just said the king. No?
Like, what's his name?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think-
Sorry.
I think it's Alexander the Great. I think.
Great.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Now in Daniel 2, what part of the statue with the medals was Greece?
Was
It's
it
the
the
third
bronze
one
belly?
down.
Yeah, it was the bronze and belly and thighs are brass. What about Daniel 7? Which one was Greece?
Second one. I
Yeah,
don't know.
no, the third one
Third one?
would have been after the bear, so it would have been the leopard. with
Leopard.
wings. So I'm guessing the 4 wings the leopard has representative why he's off the ground in some form or fashion,
Mm,
why the beast is running, but that'd be my guess. I don't know.
touching the ground.
The he-goat comes to the ram that is standing before the water in Elam or Susa, which is the Medes and Persian kingdom, and runs into it violently in the strength of his power. So from Daniel's perspective, he's witnessing the destruction of the kingdom that will eventually destroy Babylon, but it hasn't even destroyed Babylon yet. So it's kind of,
Where?
he's seeing 2 steps ahead instead of 1 step ahead. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now this dream, if we look at it as far as history is concerned, the dream is in 550-ish BC. Now Alexander the Great defeats the Medes and Persians 229 years later.
Wow.
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 So it would be the battle. Hey, Deb. The battle's somewhere around 331 BC. So we're at 550 BC and it's 331. So he's seeing substantial future events from his perspective.
Wow.
So I think the he-goat or the Greeks, I think the battle rages from like 334 to 331.
Hmm.
Okay. Now we'll continue. Somebody will quickly want to read 7 and 8, and then we'll cut and then come right back.
I saw it attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering its 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground and trampled on it, and none could rescue the ram from its power. The goat became very great, but at the height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place 4 prominent horns grew up toward the 4 winds of heaven.
Okay, we still got 3 minutes. So a quick summary, the he-goat or Greece smotes the ram that has the 2 horns, which is the Medes and the Persians, okay? The ram's horns are broken and cast to the ground. So Medes and the Persians are destroyed by this he-goat, which is Greece. The he-goat magnifies himself. He does his own will. The great horn of the he-goat is broken while he's still strong. So that would be who?
The king.
Of Greece.
Mhm.
Yeah, the great guy.
Alexander the Great.
Under the, yeah.
So he killed it, or he dies at age 32.
Wow.
They say maybe typhoid or some type of high fever illness of some sort.
Hmm.
And then it says 4 notable horns arise. And so we still have 2 minutes. Somebody read verse 22.
The 4 horns that replace the one that was broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation, but will not have the same power.
Okay, so 4 guys come up after he dies. Now, he didn't have any heirs to the throne. So I think history says, again, if we're following history and these 4 kingdoms or whatever come out of him, history says 4 generals split his territory. So we're gonna cut and then come right back, and we'll start with those 4 generals that split the territories in just a sec. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.